are
Sir,
doing
we are
for
we are we are on live, sir.
okay. So today's topic is development and biodegradation, and what we are doing today we will discuss about the biodegradation and the people, how much people are beneficial or deprived of due to developmental issues and biodegradation. What I just wanted to share with you is that the program which we do on webinar, we share that with the government, and then whatsoever input is further required by the government, that we try to answer them, and then it becomes a part of the policy. Not that our each webinar becomes part of that, but the webinar which like that of today's webinar or some other such webinar which we are very concerned with the people and the development, the government takes interest or the people takes interest, then we go for more further deepening probing on the subject. So today's webinar is equally important, that whatsoever we will be discussing, the people will have, uh, people are having interest in it and they will have an eye on it, and this will be discussed at the other level also. So with these words, I welcome you, and I welcome all the viewers, our viewers on Facebook and this YouTube, and I request you to begin your presentation. As I mentioned that only you are the speaker and I am there to moderate you or to talk to you, because we are these days very busy, and we wanted to have one more expert, but we could not find time. You might have seen that when yesterday we have an important webinar on the media. So that is there, and I have been told that you are one of the great expert on the biodegradation, because the common man, uh, he said, he referred your name to me, and he said that you are an expert. So I thought that um, I must talk to you and I must invite you. So with these words, I would like to request you to begin your presentation.
Thank you so much, Professor Narayan, for inviting me to join you in this beautiful initiative that you have. Before the presentation of a PowerPoint, I would like to say a few words of introduction. Then the PowerPoints can be played afterwards. Uh, so, as I mentioned, I'm very grateful to you for inviting me to join your great initiative. I have been also following some of your previous webinars that every week I think you share through the YouTube and other mediums, and I'm grateful to be part of this. And so before I start speaking, a brief words of introduction for me would be my name as it is Dinesh Suna. I coordinate a program called the Ecumenical Water Network. It's a global network of experts and civil society organizations and various faith-based groups, which is part of a World Council of Churches. It is a fellowship of uh, more than 350 churches around the world, but that caters to almost 600 million people who are members of the WCC, the World Council of Churches. And WCC since 1948 has been, since the time that the United Nations was established, so was the WCC. It is headquartered in Geneva, where I'm currently based in Switzerland. And the WCC has been focusing on several issues from much before even the UN had started to talk about, for example, on climate change, much before the Rio conference, the Earth Summit in 1992. The WCC has been talking about it since 1970s, for example. And I'm very happy that I would be able to speak to our participants, listeners today on the issue of biodiversity, development, and biodegradation. And today is a very special day. It is the World Environment Day, June 5th. And I'm very privileged that we are organizing this talk at such an important day. It also is a tribute to mark the World Environment Day, so to say. So uh, let me first give a brief remark of the importance and the connection between development and biodegradation. Then I would go to my presentation. And as I said, the biodiversity, the facing threats that are posed by rampant biodegradation, and that's affecting all over the world, including our own country, India. And so biodiversity, as we all know, it refers to the variety of living organisms that exist on our planet. And you can say that from the smallest microbes to the largest mammals, for example. So it is also crucial to human well-being, as it provides us with the ecosystem services that sustain our lives, such as clean air, water, food, etc. So, however, the world is currently experiencing a biodiversity crisis. Extinction rates are increasing at a very alarming level, and the loss of biodiversity threatens the stability of the entire ecosystem. Now, just to refer some of the recent reports on this, that approximately 1 million animal and plant species could get extinct within decades. And since 16th century, because of the humans actions, or the, as we call it, the anthropocentric approach, that human in the center and the rest of the planet is at the periphery. Because of that approach, more than 680 vertebrates species have been extinct already. And as I said, about 1 million animals and plants are at the risk of getting extincted, all because of our human beings doing wrongdoings. So one of the main drivers for this crisis of this biodiversity loss is rampant biodegradation. So the rapid degradation of the natural resources and habitats due to human activities such as urbanization, deforestation, industrialization, and pollution, etc. So this unbridled degradation can have devastating consequences. As we know, it can destroy the entire ecosystems, making it impossible for many species to survive. So it can also impact the food chain, leading to a decline of the availability of food for both animals and humans. Additionally, biodegradation can also contribute to climate change by releasing carbon into the atmosphere, which in turn would exacerbate or increase the already critical issue of global warming. And this is a vicious cycle. This will all one feed into the other. So to address these issues, we must take a sort of a multifaceted approach that includes adopting more sustainable practices, community-oriented practices that would reduce our impact as human beings on the environment. We also need to protect, conserve the natural habitats. We also need to form and implement policies to mitigate the effects of climate change, and thereby also to protect biodiversity. It is also important to recognize the value of biodiversity and the role it plays in our own lives. So protecting biodiversity is not just a moral obligation, but it's an economic imperative also. I come from a faith-based organization, and faith groups have got a moral imperative to protect the nature. This is our obligation, but not everybody will have that same motive. Some would be more inclined to an economic imperative, not just a moral imperative. So therefore, preserving biodiversity is a long-term investment in our collective future. So therefore, to end my introductory note, we must work together to protect and preserve the biodiversity. We cannot afford to let this rampant biodegradation continue to threaten our natural world. And by recognizing the importance of biodiversity and taking timely and decisive action, particularly by our governments, but not only governments, as individuals like you and me, we can ensure a sustainable future for ourselves and for the planet. So, friends, this is my introductory remark for the for development, biodiversity, and biodegradation. And now let us try to unpack through some slides that I have. Professor Narayan has asked me to speak for about 30 to 40 minutes. I will try to be shorter than that if possible. And through the PowerPoint presentation, we will continue. And then if you have any questions or comments, you're most welcome to raise them. So may I request our tech friends to play the PowerPoint? Okay, very well. So friends, let me walk us through. Now, Professor Narayan had given this very interesting topic, development and biodegradation. Sounds very simple, but then development, whose development and at whose cost? Society for Empowerment is a Gandhian philosophical organization based on Gandhian philosophy. And whether the current mode of development is really acceptable to our great father Mahatma Gandhi, we will ask that question towards the end. And but let us look at some facts. The richest 1% of the world grabbed nearly 2/3 of all new wealth that was created in 2022. 1% richest people in the world captured 2/3 of world's wealth. That is twice as much money. 1% people had twice as much money as the bottom 99% of the people. I'm pretty sure that you and me fall in the bottom 99%. But the 1% per people have got 2 times more than all the 99% people's wealth, according to the Oxfam's report on inequality. Now, coming to India. India is not much different. India's top 1% rich owned more than 40.5% of its total wealth in 2021, according to the report by Oxfam again. And if you go by the top 10% of the Indian population, they hold 77% of the total national wealth. 10% Indians have 77% of the wealth, and 90% people have got only 23% wealth. These are some facts also we need to consider. Even in India, in 2022, the number of billionaires that increased to 166 from 102. So we only probably know the Ambanis and the Adanis as billionaires, but we do have 166 billionaires, and these billionaires are not in rupees, billionaires in dollars. And 1 billion is a 1,000 million. So those people who have more than $1,000 are a billionaire. So it is quite shocking when you see the situation around our country and the number of wealthy people around. In 2022, on the other hand, the officially published data from the Niti Aayog is 10.2% people of our great country still live under below the poverty line. We all know that the published figures and the actual figures, there's a big difference. But still, going by the published figure also of the government data, we have 145 million people, or nearly 146 million people, living below the poverty line. That means they cannot earn more than 177 rupees per day. That's the definition. Now I wanted to play a song, but I will share that song. It's called Pal Pal Bita Jaye Re Samay To Bita Jaye Re. It's a beautiful song, also based on Gandhian philosophy. I would love to sing this, but maybe if time permits, I would sing that later, but I would share the lyrics for sure. Now, Professor Narayan had shared some of the key guiding topics when he chose this topic, and he had asked me to reflect a little bit on this. So he also talked about the SEEA. So we know the system of environmental economic accounting. So he wanted me to throw some light on this, and we can also discuss later on if time permits in more details. So the SEEA is the system of environmental economic accounting. So what is it about? That it is an international accepted international statistical standard for environmental and economic accounting. So it is basically a statistical system of environmental and economic accounting. Not, we all know about auditing, accounting of finances, of economy, but we are not talking so much about environmental auditing or accounting. So the SEEA, it also provides a framework for organizing and presenting statistics on the environment and its relationship with the economy. So both ways it works. It's relation of environment and economy with environment. Then the EEA, or the environmental economic accounts, can provide information about the various aspects relates to our environment and natural resources. For example, it can provide you, if you look into the data generated by EEA, that can provide you information, statistics about extraction of natural resources. What are their use within the economy? Natural resource stock levels, the changes in those stocks during a specific period, and economic activities related to the environment. So if you look into a report published by EEA, you would be able to know what are our natural capitals, what are our natural resources around us available, and how they've been extracted, at what rate and at what cost these were then further traded, and so on. And there is a cost benefit ratio, and everything you cannot take into account in economic terms, but blindly, if you don't have this mechanism, then you may end up doing extracting natural resources which are finite. They'll end up one day, there's not unlimited aluminum or bauxite or iron ores or anything that are under our earth. We will run out of them soon, and that is why it is important that we need to have these systems in place. Now, there is another aspect professor wanted me to talk about, India's particularly about uh, the India's energy conservation amendment. But before that, he also wanted to talk about the carbon neutral. I'm just going back, sorry, one second. Yes, carbon neutral cities. So it is important to first understand what is a being carbon neutral. You also need to know what are some of the terms. For example, you need to know carbon credit, carbon offset, carbon trading, etc. So let me try to take us through some steps. So what is a carbon neutral city? Carbon neutral or zero carbon city is one that reduces the majority of carbon emissions and then offsets the residual emissions through either plantations or through using renewable energies, etc., to the point that its operations do not result in the net increase of emissions. Now, globally, today we have 708 cities that have joined the race to become carbon neutral cities. 708 cities. So what are they trying to achieve? That they will become carbon neutral when? By 2050. So almost nearly after 25 years or later, they would become carbon neutral. Now, in India's case, India is trying to achieve this goal of becoming carbon neutral by 2070. Rest of the world, the standard they have adopted is 2050. But for India, because of various factors, ours is very large population and our socio-economic standard of living and our dependency at the moment of coal and fossil fuel, etc. We are not yet a developed country, and therefore our target, our leaders have set is 2070. Now, last month, the one city, that is Sanchi in Madhya Pradesh, was declared to be a carbon neutral city on May 3rd. The only city so far in India to become carbon neutral. So that the meaning, again, I'm trying to come back. How do one become carbon neutral city is by offsetting all the carbon footprints that we leave on the planet, because everything we do leaves a carbon footprint, isn't it? The electricity we use at our houses, the cars we drive, or the companies that produce products, or anything that we do, it requires energy, and therefore there's a carbon footprint. But if you replace all of these or most of these by renewable energy and then do enough investments, for example, by offsetting the carbon footprint by plantation or any other projects towards renewable energy, then your in and out cancels each other, and that's where your carbon footprints becomes net zero or become carbon neutral. So this is what in India it's very difficult to achieve this. In Europe or North America, it's maybe slightly easier because of the technology and people's standard of living. But in India, this is also started now. So the fossil fuel now provides around 70% of India's energy needs at the moment. 70% of India's energy needs comes from the fossil fuel. So we are talking about 100% renewable energy. That means at the moment only 30% probably we are talking about renewable energy. We have to achieve to the 100%. And the irony is that this year we already have a 8% more demand on energy than previous year. So there is still an increase then decline, but overall goal is to become net zero by 2070. Now, despite our commitments to phase down the use of the fossil fuel, as per the COP26 in Glasgow Agreement. COP, I'm sure you all are aware of. It's a process within the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, UNFCCC. And so since after the Rio conference, the UNFCCC came into being, and then they started hosting the Conference of Parties, which is in short called as COP. Conference of Parties started meeting first, second, third, like COP1, COP2, COP3, like that. Many of us have heard about the Kyoto Protocol, which was the result of COP3 in Kyoto, Japan. Then we also know about COP15 in Copenhagen. Then we knew about COP21 in Paris, where the Paris Accord was signed. And then the COP26 in Glasgow, in UK, United Kingdom, in Scotland, where the phasing down use of coal was agreed upon. Okay, I had the opportunity to attend most of these COPs, including the one in Copenhagen, the one in Paris, the one in Glasgow, the one in Egypt, and I will be attending also the one in Dubai later this year. So I had this opportunity to study the COP processes a lot also. So India was the one in Glasgow pushed for not phasing out coal, but phasing down. That means we will not eliminate it completely, but slowly we will cut down, because a majority of our population of 1.4 billion people still depend on coal. Okay, now go to the next. Just some photos of COP26 of mine in the in Scotland, Glasgow. Now, to say something about carbon credit and offset, this also Professor Narayan had asked me to speak. So I had already told what is carbon footprint. It is the total amount of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases, the activities of a person or an organization or a company that generates the total emissions of CO2 and other greenhouse gas because of the activities of a person or a company or an institution. So that includes both direct and indirect emissions. For example, you travel in your car, you emit. You take a flight and travel, you emit CO2s, right? Flight can emit a lot more than cars or buses, for example. Now, what is carbon credit? Now, you need to also understand these terms. Carbon footprint, we knew. Greenhouse gas is carbon dioxide and other forms of poisonous gases, which is making this earth more warm, right? So what is carbon credit? Carbon credits are generally represent a reduction in greenhouse gases, because at the moment we have a lot of CO2 emissions in the atmosphere. From pre-industrial level, we have gone several times higher of CO2 emissions. So carbon credit generally reduces the emission. But what is carbon offset? Carbon offset can remove the greenhouse gas. Like, for example, an example is using of solar energy is a carbon credit. That way you reduce the carbon footprints or production of CO2 by not going by thermal energy, but by going solar energy. So you reduce your carbon footprint. However, carbon offsetting is where you do massive plantations, and that would absorb and remove the CO2 from the atmosphere. So here also there are some little bit of explanations how offset of carbon emissions are done. So first you measure your emissions. There are applications, you Google it, and you would find how much emission you're making or I'm making, as individuals. If you put the data, do you have a fridge, do you have a television, how many cars you have, how many motorcycles you have, how many times you take the bus, how many times you take the flights. If you put this data, you will know how much of CO2 you are emitting per year. That way institutions can do more importantly. Then next step is how can we reduce by going into renewable energy of solar or wind, etc. We can reduce the emissions, and then you offset the rest. So fund emission reduction projects elsewhere. For example, you take a flight. Okay, you take a flight, you emit X amount of CO2. Then you sign a pledge that I would like to contribute 100 or 1,000 rupees towards offsetting my CO2 emissions. So you buy that credit. Okay, they will take that money and do some projects of solar or wind energy or plantation, etc. Some companies will do that, and after offsetting, you will receive a credit. And companies are also allowed at some of these carbon credits, which they can then also trade. If they are allowed to emit only certain level of emission, the remaining, then they can also trade with others. So you can also buy and sell these carbon credits today in the market. But this is a way of monitoring. Then, Professor, you had asked me also to speak a little bit about the Energy Conservation Amendment Act 2022. We all knew that in 2001 we had the Energy Conservation Act that was amended in 2022. Almost after 20 years, this was amended after the COP26 Glasgow to meet those targets. So some of the key highlights are, so carbon credit trading, as I said. So there has to be a mechanism of carbon credit in the first place, then also carbon trading, and how do we monitor? Once you have this mechanism, companies will come under scrutiny, and then there will be a reward and punishment mechanism. Second is obligation to use non-fossil sources of energy. There is another key point of this act is that the central government specifies minimum share of consumption of non-fossil sources by designated consumers. So there is an obligation for you that you have to have certain amount of your energy need must come from non-fossil fuel sources, that is solar, wind, or any other accepted and approved alternative source of energy, which is clean energy. Energy conservation and sustainable code for buildings. We also had this energy conservation and building codes before. That was also reviewed under this act that was amended, and they put the word sustainable in it. Because if we don't use the sustainable code for energy conservation in building, construction of buildings, that also is going to create problem. And then finally, standards for vehicles and vessels. This is again, as we know, that there are certain an energy requirement of our vehicles. There are electrical cars, but also there are pollutions emissions as per standards from the car manufacturing companies. So there have been certain standards revised here. And last but not the least, there is a penalty if we did not adhere to the principles or the clauses that are there in this act. Good. So these were the issues that Professor had asked me to touch upon, and then finally to talk about the water issues. Principally, I have to tell you that water is my principal topic, and then if you allow me, I can talk for the whole day. But I would just briefly share something about the water crisis in globally, then water crisis in India, what are the global responses, what are the response from India, what are some of the community water management practices, then also about various type of water, blue water, green water, or wastewater, all those differences that we need to make. I mean, for our understanding, blue water is basically the fresh water that are there in the rivers and the lakes. The green water is the rainwater, and gray water is the wastewater, which can be treated and reused. Yeah, so let me quickly then go into some of the, there are some of the information here about my organization, but I need not go through all this. But just to let you know that we believe that water is a gift of God. It's a fundamental human right and a public goods. Therefore, it should not be privatized. This is my organization's motto. And I work through raising awareness around water issues and calling with government and the UN and do advocacy with them so that there is a water justice component on it, and not like 1% people enjoy all the water and the 99% gets suffer. And all solutions are not fair and ecologically sustainable, so we also promote only sustainable solutions. And we believe that water crisis, do you know that only 0.3% of, not even 1%, 0.3% water, fresh water is available in the rivers and lakes. The rest all are either frozen or they're below the ground, and etc. So it's such a scarce resource, and still the water crisis is not because of the scarcity alone, but because of the unequal distribution of this precious resource, or life-giving resource called water. It's the issue of justice and rights. I just quickly move on some of the advocacy works that we also do at the United Nations level. I'm based here in Geneva. We have an Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights based here. The headquarters are here in Geneva. And there is a United Nations Special Rapporteur on human right to water and sanitation. His office also is based here. We do very strong collaboration with them. We do work with if there are certain around water, some global platforms are there, like the World Water Forum or the WWF, the World Water Week that happens in Stockholm, Sweden every year in August. That's where we participate to create awareness and sensitize people. Then after almost 50 years, the United Nations organized a water conference last month. And I had the opportunity to participate and lead a delegation. And I'll talk more about that. We also work on an interfaith approach to human right to water and sanitation. Friends, some quick statistics that according to the Joint Monitoring Program report of 2019, we still have about 2 billion people. 2 billion people, that is more than the whole population of India, still lack access to safely managed drinking water. And about 4 billion people half of world's population, more than half of world's population, they lack access to safely managed sanitation facilities. That means no access to a toilet, for example. By 2025, they say about two-thirds of world will be under stress for water. Then, not to mention the conflicts relates to water bodies, the riparian countries, which are the states which share a water body between two or more countries or states. We have internationally, we have it in Ethiopia, and Ethiopia's Renaissance Dam that they constructed over the River Nile. It almost landed them in the Security Council of the United Nations. They almost started a war that involved Egypt, Ethiopia, and Sudan. Within India, we have Kaveri is another issue of conflict, and maybe there are several others. These are some maps. All those red dots you could see is facing extreme water stress, and you could see Indian map is almost covered with red. That means it's very much extremely high to high level of water stress. Okay, and let me go to the next again. Now, we all knew about Cape Town, a city in South Africa that faced almost it ran out of water 2018. And subsequently, the following year, okay, in the Cape Town, recently there was a study that came by a university in Sweden. And the WCC, we published an article. You can also, I'll share the links with you all. The reason behind the Cape Town issue, because they faced a day zero, that one particular day there will be no more water on that month, and they announced that in the year 2018 during April, or sometimes they said there will be no more water anymore, and they had to ration water. Everybody can get up to 20 liters only. That was the case in Cape Town, and how they handle it, that's another issue. But why this became an issue? Because of the rich had too much of access to water, and they abused water, filling the swimming pools, etc., etc. So that's what I have tried to mention here. Now, Chennai, our own country, faced a day zero situation where in 2019, you should remember that in 2015, Chennai suffered the worst inundation in a century. So much of flooding took place in 2015. 4 years later, Chennai completely ran out of water. So they had their brace with day zero. How from one, such short interval, from a massive flooding of a century to complete drying up your rivers and ponds, and there is no water in the ground. So the main cause of both excessive flooding and the drought or situation was because of unbridled urbanization and construction. As I started by saying, the development where blindly you rapidly you go urbanization and construction processes. Now, Chennai's water sources reduced to 3.2 square kilometers from 12.6 square kilometer in a course of a century or two. There are other factors to water. I do not want to elaborate a lot, but we know that more than thousands of children die every day around the world because of lack of clean water, and we don't talk about it because it's just because of diarrhea and other kind of simple preventable diseases. Thousands of children are dying every day. But if there is a bomb blast and few children die, that becomes national headlines anywhere in the world. There are other issues related to water, as in the schools, girl children drop out from school because of lack of hygiene, and particularly menstrual hygiene. If they're menstruating already, then they cannot go to school those days because there is no functioning toilets and water supplies, etc. We have to therefore follow 28th of May is a menstrual hygiene day, and I conducted a webinar last week only on this. I'll share the link with the professor, and then he can share this with you. We also need to share World Toilet Day. World Toilet Day is November 19th every year. India has Swachh Bharat Abhiyan, and we already declared ourselves in 2019 as an ODF country, that is open defecation free country. That means nobody is openly defecating anymore in India. This is what we say, but the realities could be different. As you would, I don't live in India anymore, but then you would be able to see people openly defecating, attending to the nature's call, etc. So these are various relations to water. And then that one of the SDGs, Sustainable Development Goal, there are 17 of them. One of them talks about water, goal number 6, which speaks about water and sanitation for all by 2030. This is the Sustainable Development Goal, 17 of them, and goal number 6 is about water. Friends, there is another interesting fact that I will say, and probably in the next 4 or 5 minutes, I will stop, sir, because I think I have reached my time. The we drink water, but then do you know that we eat more water than we drink? We eat more water than we drink. And this is something very mind-boggling information, that a cup of coffee can have up to 140 liters of water, that is the virtual water in it, or a kilogram of chicken can have up to 4,000 liters of water in it, and so on and so forth. How is this possible in the first place? Because these are the virtual water that an animal was raised for a few years, and all the fodder that it ate and all the water that it drank, and then somewhere maybe slaughtered in one country, transferred into another country, and all this, it has its all water footprint. So therefore we have to be careful about addressing virtual water footprint. Being vegetarian is the best. If we cannot, then probably eat which is locally grown food. Friends, there's another aspect I wanted to highlight here, is that we became the World Council of Churches has become a blue community. Blue community is what is that we say no to bottled water. In India, everywhere we see people buying bottled water, drinking in the railway stations, in the flights, and then when we travel, and then we dump it. And then all this plastic pollution that is uncontrollable. Today is World Environment Day, and the theme of today's World Environment Day is to stop plastic pollution, or beat plastic pollution is the theme, right? And we produce every minute, a million of plastic bottles around the world, and one single use plastic bottles we drink and then we dump it. So these are some of the issues that we need to seriously address. So the WCC became a blue community in 2016. That means we don't use plastic bottles anymore. And if I travel to anywhere in the world, I always carry a bottle like this one, which is reusable and refillable. And even in my organization here in Geneva, we have more than 300 staff working here from all over the world. They are here. And from my program, we distributed these bottles to everyone. We installed tap water distillery, the fountains here, so that people don't have to use bottled water. Friends, so what is blue community? As I said, we are a blue community. That means we have to respect human right to water, say no to privatization of water, and promote public-public partnership. Do not privatize. Okay, look for public-public partnership. And institution, university, colleges, municipalities, anybody can become a blue community. Maybe SFE could also become a blue community. Yeah. Some lifestyle changes also we can do. Stop buying bottled water, stop water wastage, and save water wherever possible. Eat locally grown food, eat more vegetables than meat. These are some lifestyle changes which are, I believe, in Gandhian principle as well. And one last thing, then I'll stop, is the uh, human right to water came only in 2010, not before. We think that probably in Universal Declaration of Human Right in 1948, water became a human right. No, in only 2010, UN recognized water as a human right. So less than 2 decades, right? So what are human rights? There are 5 normative contents. One is accessibility. Water should be accessible. It should be availability. If the tap is there, you open it, the water should be coming. Availability. The number 3 is affordability. You should be able to afford it. If the water bill is more expensive than milk and honey, what's the use of that water? Like the Delhi app government had an interesting case study where they made water for free until a certain level of use. If you go above, like a rich person would, then they have to pay the full price. So it has to be affordable. Then quality. What's the point of coming 24/7 water which the quality is not good? You will get cholera and die. And then quantity. WHO has recommended a minimum of 100 liters of water per day per person for drinking and sanitation purposes. So we have to have these issues and listed. So friends, I'll stop here. And I think there are a few others, but I think I'll stop. And then if you have any questions, I'll take responsibility. But just these are some photographs of the UN Water Conference that we had in New York earlier this year at the United Nations. This is at the United Nations General Assembly, where we presented this manifesto, Water Justice Manifesto, that was 500 organizations signed it, and 560,000 people, 5,60,000 people signed our manifesto, and that was presented to the United Nations. So a lot of things we can do, and my 40 minutes over as my timer says. So I'll stop here, sir. If you have any questions, comments, I'll be happy to take them. Thank you very much.
There is Sona, because the presentation which you made is very, you have enriched our knowledge about the water, about the sanitation, about the human rights, and about the present biodiversity and the issues which are being faced today by the human being in terms of biodiversity and also in terms of development. We should go for development and diversity considering the people need, the individuals need, the human being needs. As you must be aware of that I was also in National Human Rights Commission of India for quite long year, and so I can understand with that. And then, being an anthropologist, I have done several studies on water issues. One of my study was on the tribes of um, Santhal Pargana. Now it is Jharkhand. There is a tribe called the Saurya Paharia. So they live at the top of the hills, and they do not have any access to water. So one fine morning, sometime in 1974 or 5, it was the headline of the newspaper was that 200 Paharias died because of contaminated water they consumed. Then I next day again there was similar news. The headline was the headline of the newspaper. Then next day I went there and I tried to understand what is the problem. And I found that there is only one natural stream, there is no other source of water. And from that stream, the tribals used to collect water for drinking and for their all work, even for cooking, for cleaning, all that they were using. And each one of them has to come just below the spring so that they can drink water or they can carry water, whatsoever they want to do with the water. Then I suggested to the government that please have some uh, rig boring or boring system so that they can have some water regularly. But somehow or other it could not, government could not succeed in rig boring. Then after few years again that the headline of the newspaper was that the people, so many people died. I went and stayed with them for 2 weeks. Then I found that there is a lot of bamboo tree among them, and that is a natural one. They did not grow bamboo. Bamboo is a nature gift for them. So I just trained them in using one bamboo by putting it inside another bamboo so that they can use it as a pipe and just place it beneath the spring, and at the doorstep you have safe drinking water. So then the death rate was very little, and today they are still practicing that system and there is no death. So that was one successful experiment which I did, and that has been adopted by other states in other states also. So it's true that human rights issues we were considering like this Paharia's problem. There were other community also who were having who do not have any access to water. So they what they did that uh, they all tried to convict, they all tried to connect themselves with the Paharias. That they used to come and see the system, how they developed and became independent in getting water. Most of the people who, your people who are in Jharkhand or in adjoining state, they must be knowing it and they can share with you, or else I can share my old reports with you. So that is some important, such important studies needs to be highlighted and to be carried out because there are still several castes, several tribes who do not have access to water and they die because the waters are not very systematic uh, and drinkable. So that leads to death. So that is with this program, I can request you that if you like SFE and you can collaborate with you in solving the problem of water crisis. The other dimension is when I was in human rights those days, across the country, there are some community who are not allowed to have access to water because of their, uh, say, Varna system or because of their caste system and all that. That also needs to be, people needs to be made aware of it. As you made right now aware of the people, how to plastic be, it should not be used and no water should be taken, uh, water no water should be allowed to be taken only by a particular caste and by not allowed to be other caste. So that kind of such things of such research can be undertaken, especially among the nomadic tribes, because they just move out from one place to another place in a month or in 2 months or so, but they do not stay at a particular place for more than 3 months. So that what kind of water we are going to provide or what kind of policy we have to provide them water because they are living at the top of the hills. They are not mingling with the people who are living at the bottom of the hills. So their routine, I have one more report that is on primitive tribes of India, the lifestyle of primitive tribes of India. There I have also discussed for the water issue. And I am just putting it before you so that it can draw your attention where the international platform may put it forth to international bodies. So that is something more important which we need to do, and that is responsible for the biodegradation. Because if the 40% of the population, even today in 2023, are unable to have an access to water, safe drinking water, what to talk of safe drinking water, even drinking water. So then it become only hypocrisy that we as an academician or as a researcher, we just try to ponder upon such problems, but we do not try to be very realistic to stay with them and do it. But as a Gandhian and as an researcher, I do action research also. And there, water is one of my agenda to solve the problem, the crisis of the water, especially the safe drinking water. So that is a very important thing which I would like to request you that you please have a thought over it and think how we can do it. It's not only the problem of India, but in other countries also. Such problems are there in the rural area with the indigenous population, even in Geneva or the interior area of Geneva. You have such problems also. The access to safe drinking water. That was, you are very right when you say that bottled water should not be used. you are using the bottled water, it means more plastic, you are generating more and more plastic and creating a problem of the biodegradation. So the clothes which we are wearing, the clothes is also responsible for biodegradation. The clothes which we are using, like terracotta or the synthetic clothes, Gandhiji has made a very good appeal to the people, and the people have adopted that. You can make use charkha and make cloth out of your own system, and which suits to your culture. So I have done that experiment also. There is a tribe called whom I call as the living Gandhians, Tana Bhagat. So if you go, there are three kind of tribes in India and also two in Africa who are using even today the charkas that was popularized by Gandhiji, and they are using clothes also. So those who are using charka and, and making clothes from that for themselves, they are generating very little, you see, the carbon problem and the other problems. That five or six communities with whom I have worked and I know them, they also need to be uh, focused before the world so that that can be an example. Say each country have such kind of population. If we and they have their own system, they have developed their own indigenous system of how to balance the nature so that or ecology so that there may not be degradation of ecology or environment for all that. Those traditional system being, being practiced today also needs to be made more popular so that even if we use a smaller scale, then we can do some good to the society, to the world. And finally, what I said that these and all such studies which I have made suggest that in the name of development, the kind of development which we have brought to the people is differential development, discriminatory development. So all these kind of what kind of development we are doing, we must go for holistic development, not for the deprivatory development, not for the discriminatory development, because the inputs through which we are doing is it should be it must have a balanced approach for the balanced ecological environmental development so that there may not have much biodegradation, and then we must not feel shy of our research or shy of our work. So Society for Empowerment, which is working with the Gandhian vision and Gandhian philosophy, you see, once Gandhiji has said that when Arun Gandhiji, Dr. Arun Gandhiji, grandson of Mahatma Gandhi, he was very close to Society for Empowerment, and he was very frequently uh, coming to us. So in one of his address, he has said that in childhood he has a small pencil. So he said to Gandhiji that I will not do with it. He threw that pencil and went to Gandhiji and requested him to give him a fresh, new pencil. Gandhiji said, You know that one pencil cost how much of tree wood and how much of it cost the biodegradation and all that. You just go first, you bring that small pencil, then I will give you new pencil. So what Arun Gandhi was trying to explain was that we need to preserve and promote the our trees, ecology, environment, even at the smallest level. All the smallest level will become a great level at one point of time. So we must take such lessons from Gandhiji. Gandhiji used to say that the nature has given us water, the nature has given us forest, the nature has given us sun rays and all that. So we must hand over the kind of water, the kind of sun, the kind of other things which nature has given to our coming generation. Otherwise, what kind of society or what kind of environment ecology we are going to hand over our society? But this our textbook anywhere in any country does not teach. They do not have a syllabus to make the people understand at the zero level of their education the importance of the nature's gift and that has been gifted to you by your grandparents children, and so it is your responsibility that you must hand over at least the best ecology environment and bio things to your grandchildren so that they can do it for another coming generation, and by that way we can keep the whole world safe, free of all the carbon emission and all that. But unfortunately we are not orient. We have one course that is very popular, Gandhi and happiness. You know, we just come across such news from USA or UK or Canada or Australia that the school children are shot their uh, friends in school. Why this kind of hatred is coming? Why this kind of things are happening in school, even at the primary level? That is because they do not understand the importance of Gandhi and they do not understand that how one can remain happy. Possessing a book or possessing of truth, the maximum number of book, the maximum number of clothes, the maximum number of money, the maximum number of houses, all we we want to possess maximum and we want to become the millionaire and multi-millionaire at the cost of our poor fellow. So that attitude must go. At least we can educate the people. That is also, you see, the human rights, the discrimination of human rights are there. When we are violating the human rights, only then one becomes a rich person at the cost of the rest of the population. So that is also a violation of the human rights. But how many times we are discussing about. So that is equally important that we must educate the people and we should try to make the international body should try to take all these things into account while talking about the biodegradation or the sustainability of the ecology and environment. Sustainable, it can be sustainable only when each individual of the globe try to make it sustainable. Otherwise, only by organizing a webinar or by talking to you, we cannot do it. We cannot make it an exam. So this is we have to create examples before the society, before the human being, and we have to think for all the composite, a holistic approach, including the human rights, the human rights of the water, rights to sleep. Because you see, if you are living in any city, suddenly you will find the loud voices coming. People are using loudspeakers. People are singing and singing on the loudspeaker. That is also a violation of human rights. But how much many of us know and how many of us practice that this our single efforts, a single activity is leading to degradation of biodiversity. So I am very much thankful that you made a very good presentation,
Thank you.
and I wish that we can have such a session with you
Hmm.
in the near future so that we can educate the people,
Yeah.
especially for the water and
Hmm.
the other such issues.
Hmm.
So thank you very much.
Yeah. So, Professor,
Uh,
there are some questions here, I think, on the comments on the screen. Should we
yes,
respond to them?
definitely, definitely.
Yeah. So,
Please.
can I start by responding a couple of them? I think one on the screen is, but anyway, first of all, thank you so much for your summarizing and giving some information, Professor. Before coming to that question, you raised a very important aspect on the accessibility and how the existing stigmas and discriminations in societies that can become an impediment or an hindrance or a obstacle on human right to water. Particularly in India, we do have this. Till today, we do have certain communities, the Dalits or any other communities that you referred, they do definitely have difficulties in accessing to community water sources like a tap or a well or something. And the UN Human Rights Council has published a report through the UN Special Rapporteur on right to water. And the report is on stigma and discrimination. So that includes caste based discrimination, racial discrimination, and some discrimination on the basis of diseases, for example, HIV and AIDS, or people with disability, and so many other level of discrimination that communities can face. That becomes an obstacle in getting access to the right to water. So that is definitely one important aspect that you highlighted. So thanks for that, and all other community based that you mentioned. Now coming to this question, carbon credit and carbon offsetting, can it be done by individual and panchayat level? Definitely everything can be done at individual level, and as they say, the charity begins at home, or before changing the society we have to change within our family, the individuals members, and then increase the net for wider. So basically, as I mentioned, carbon credit is basically to reduce the carbon footprint, because when we use conventional energy, which is fossil based or extractive industry based energy, that could be fossil fuel, that could be coal, thermal, all those, any of these would have significant impact on carbon footprint. But when you change to solar energy, wind energy, and any other alternate forms of energy, that is carbon credit. Basically you are reducing your carbon footprint. And what is carbon offsetting? A simple example is by planting a tree, you are already offsetting, you are removing the carbon from the atmosphere, because the trees, plants, they absorb the carbon dioxide and give you oxygen in return. But the bigger companies, those who offset, they also do like they capture the carbon and bury them deep under the ground or under the ocean. That's called a carbon capture method. So these are companies can do, but as individuals, I think we all can do carbon credit and carbon offsetting. But you could also take advantage, because as I mentioned, these are the schemes allow you to have some monetary benefits as well. And therefore, as a panchayat level, you could always consult with the local authorities, and then a decision can be made at the panchayat level of a large scale carbon credit trading and carbon offsetting. That means you could take provisions under the, for example, under the adaptation and mitigation measures relates to climate change. There are mitigation and adaptation funds that are available under the Conference of Parties, COP. The last COP 27 in Egypt, in Sharm el Sheikh, where I was also there, it contributed towards adaptation fund. So what would you as a panchayat level also could do is try to tap these resources. If your decision is passed, let us then offset the carbon by planting this amount of trees. Then those, because you did this, you may also be rewarded through some monetary benefit as well. So that can be explored further. And carbon credit trading at a local level is slightly challenging, because the process is much more larger and complicated. But we can always start at a simple level. Then there was another question about carbon neutral villages in developing nation. So this is very interesting. Villages are already carbon neutral, meaning you don't have so many vehicles, so many cars, or so much of technological gadgets and industries. These are not there mostly in typical villages, but thanks to the media and urbanization processes, slowly our villages are also becoming small towns. There are less and less villages and more small towns now, because we also have now, everybody has a motorbike in their house. Every second person may have a vehicle, a car or something. So there is very thin line between villages and towns. But a typical Indian village, as it was about several decades ago, they are already carbon neutral. That means you meet your needs. For example, I come from Odisha. Okay, I live in Switzerland, but I come from Odisha, from a district called Koraput, which is one of the most socio-economically backward districts. It used to be called as the malaria house of our state. Anybody goes there will catch malaria and so on. There used to be a community. They are primitive tribes. Sir, you mentioned about primitive tribes in Malkangiri area. There is a district called Malkangiri where the Bonda tribes are there. So the Bonda tribes are one of the primitive tribes. Till date, they do not wear any clothes, but only wear those beads, ornaments, etc., and maybe a loin cloth. And they live in the up in the hill. They come down only for two things. One is to, they used to at least, one is kerosene to light their lamps in the night, and for salt. Because they didn't have mechanisms to make salt up in the mountains. For only these two things they would come down. The rest, everything, weaving their clothes, their food, the bow and arrow, because they use bow and arrow to shoot and kill the animals and the birds to for the food. They would not come down for anything else. So this is a very self-sufficient community, completely carbon neutral, way back 20 years ago, not in 2070 as India is targeting now, right? So yes, villages are by nature carbon neutral, but what we could do is tap the government schemes and install two things: solar power on the roof of each of the houses. If we can install solar power and meet our electricity requirement, that's a major thing. And secondly, rainwater harvesting. We have some villages where also till today it is drought. If we collect the rainwater and use it for certain purposes of our sanitation related, that will be two very big steps ahead. I think I don't see any more. Okay, Gandhian life's way of life is self-reliant. Yes, I only can agree. I couldn't agree more with this, that it should be promoted. Uh, the professor also mentioned about Gandhian philosophy of simple living. Um, Gandhiji also said the world has got um, everything for everybody's need, but not for everyone's greed. And that is what we talk about, this 1%. I started by saying 1% of this world's population have got two times more wealth than 99% of the people. So this 1% is practically greedy, because how would you consider these billionaires? They've just become greedy. And you can, in capitalistic mode of economy, one can only become too rich at the cost of the other. At least in Europe, you don't have that sort of a capitalistic, like an ultra gap. Everybody there is more or less well to do here. They have a basic standard of living. Nobody is extremely poor, nobody is extremely rich. But in India, in North America, in USA, etc., things are very different, even in Africa. Well, Gandhian lifestyle is the way of life. I could agree more. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And oh, it was very lively presentation of yours.
Thank you.
scientific input, and I'm sure that people must have been benefited by it, by this webinar. That we will come to know in a day or two, and we'll also let you know. And hope in future, whenever we request, we would like to, we will, we would like to be with us, and we will spare some time for SFE, and we are ready to share our research with you, or to have a collaborative study on common issues
Hmm.
which you like. So thank you very much once again on my personal behalf and on behalf of Society for Empowerment. And